I'm going to go through a few of these methods from the student roster. So in class with you, I already wrote the constructors. I've shared that code with you. Um, Everything's linked. If you just go to the link in our classroom, you'll find all that. But I'm going to do a few of these methods with you. So start off with a couple of basic counter methods. If I wanted to count the failing students, okay, just go ahead and give them all to me. Like the array list holds students. It's called roster. Students hold grades. So if you take a student and you get their, I forgot, is it called get grade or get GPA? Get GPA. If you get their GPA and it's below 2.0, then you're going to count them here. Okay. So let's try it again. All right. Below 2.0, so strictly less than. Then we count them. And if we count them, then we're good. All right. We want to count names with letter E. Well, okay, we're going to do something real similar to what we did right here, right? But we're just really going to change this question. So instead of counting based on GPA, we're going to count based on their get name method. That's their name. Their name might have a letter E in it and it might not, right? So we'll use index of. As long as we don't get -1, then their name had an E. Does the list have an A plus student? Okay, somebody above 4.0. All right, well, again, same loop. All right, just go ahead, hand me every single student in the roster. If I see any student in the list with a GPA, oh, geez, okay, that's greater than 4.0, I can immediately return true. I don't care about anything else. But if I reach the end of that loop and I never find one, then I'll say false. Okay, we never found one. All better than some cutoff. Okay, so we're going to actually look at kind of the reverse of that. If we ever find a single student who is not better than the cutoff, so less than or equal to, okay, because that would mean that they're not better, then we would return false. So, but if we reach the end of the problem and we haven't found a counterexample, then we'll say true. Okay. All right. And then return an array list of the B and better students. Now, we have an array list called roster that's everybody, but we want an array list of just the B or better students. I probably should have been more clear in the directions here that I didn't really want you to change the roster around. So my apologies if you went in there and removed everybody. I'll be less ambiguous on the test. But ideally, we're going to make a new array list here. So we'll call it like, well, that's bad. Let's just call it B. All right. So, all right. And then later, we'll go ahead and return this array list that we're going to build. Only some kids get in though. So who gets into the list? Well, see, it's kind of like what we were just doing here. So imagine I just borrow this code. All right. So it's real similar, but the difference is I'm going to say, give me everybody, give me their GPA. If it's at least 3.0, so at least now we're inclusive, I'm not going to return, I'm just going to add them. So this new list that I'm making, B, I'm going to add this student in. And okay, we're good there. B holds students, S is a student, right? All right, now we have some remove methods. Okay, so with remove methods, we're going to move away from this enhanced loop. Now we're going to go to an indexed loop. I showed you 3 different ways to do this. Let's try them all out here because I think there's 3 of these. So let's say we go here with let's do the backwards loop first. So give me the last student in the roster, okay, at size -1. I'll work my way back to the first student who's at index 0. I'm going right to left. I'm going to ask a question about them. All right. One thing different is now, since I'm not using an enhanced loop, I have to actually get the student from the roster. That's a student. Once I have that student taken from the roster, then I can either get their GPA or their name. Below 2.5, okay, so less than 2.5. And all right, if I find one, I'm going to remove them. So roster dot remove index I. And this is a void method. So that's really it. Okay, just go through everybody, you find one, you remove them. Okay. Um, and now we're going to remove names ending in Y. All right. Well, let's try out. Let's do I don't know. Let's do the while loop here. Okay. So this time I'm going to write a while loop, and my while loop is going to start at index 0 on the left. It's going to go all the way to the end, roster.size, but we won't quite get there, strictly less than. And now you don't have to do all this at once. Let's say I break this one down a little bit. Let's say I make a student reference. Okay, so here's job one. Like get me a student from the roster. Okay, and then let's get their name. And let's say string n is I'm going to take that student and get their name. I could have done that in one line of code, right? Or two, doesn't matter. Now that I've got their name, I want to find out if it ends in a Y. So I want a substring, okay, so that I isolate their last letter of their name, which is found at their length -1. Okay, that's a common string method we've been doing. All right, so that gets the last letter of string n. And I want to know, does that equal a lowercase y? That's a Boolean return method. If it says true, cool. Then I'm going to remove them. Okay, and if it doesn't, then I won't. So how do I remove them? All right, well, I go to the roster and I remove the student found at that index. If I don't make a removal, I increment my index so that I don't get stuck. This method is also a counter method. So that's interesting. Okay, so I need to change this here a little. I'm going to make my counter. I haven't counted anybody yet. I'm counting the removals. So I'm going to have to brace this if statement, okay, because I actually want two actions associated with it. So one is the removal and one is the count. All right. And so now I'm removing and I'm counting. And then when I'm done, I'm going to return the count. All right. So two kind of different actions taking place, the removal and the count. And we're doing them both if their name ends in a Y. All right. Array list student, remove C or better. So this is different. Now we're going to actually produce a brand new array list of the removed students. We're removing students that have a C or better. We're taking them out of the roster, and they're going to go into a new list that's going to be returned. That list doesn't exist yet, so we're going to make it, okay? I'll call it like CBA. Everyone who's got a C, B, or A gets put into here. This is a brand new list. It doesn't exist yet, all right? And ultimately, I'm going to return that list. But to make it into this list, you have to pass the test, which is you have to have a 2.0 or better, so greater than or equal to a 2.0. This time I'll try writing like just a standard loop that goes from left to right. So when I do this, I'll have to put in that corrective step that we talked about. Okay, so these are the three choices for removes. Again, you could write one line here, or you could kind of break it down a little. Like I could say like student S equals, I could go to the roster and get the student, okay? I could then maybe say like double GPA equals, I could take the student and get their GPA. Once you've got that GPA, then you can ask a question about it. Is it at least 2.0, 2.0 or better? And if it is, remember there's actually going to be two actions again. So I'll just go ahead and brace this one right off the start. And then there's really going to be a third action as well. So we'll see. So there's kind of like three things going on here. So I want to remove them from the roster. I want to add them to CBA. And then I want to actually back up my index because I don't want the loop to push forward, because remember, if you remove, they're going to shift. So we're going to wait at the same index. Now, if my first line of code said roster.remove I, that might not work well. That student that got removed would be lost forever. So there's a couple of ways I could fix this. I could say here cba.add roster.getI. Okay. That way I've already put them into the new list before I remove them. Okay. And then ultimately, after both of those actions, that's when I'm going to put my corrective step. Don't do it any sooner because it would distort which student you are getting and removing. Um, you could combine these two into one, okay? Because the remove method actually returns the item that gets removed. So maybe a little more efficient would be to actually just put this here. And what that would do is that would remove the student, return the student that got removed, who would then be added to the new list that we're building. And if you really wanted to, you could even put the minus minus on the right side of the I and do it all in one line, but this is fine here. Okay. And then finally, we've got our swap method. Now, anytime we're doing like a swap, we typically take 3 lines of code to do it. So remember, like if I'm going to swap, say, the items X and Y, I've got to hold X somewhere temporarily and then give Y to X. And then on my third line, I bring that temporary item back in and put it in for Y. Because there's going to be a moment where the same item's in the list twice. So in this case, with my roster, since it is an array list, I have to use things like get, set, add, remove. I have to use my methods. So I'm removing, I'm getting, I'm setting. There's different ways you can do it. I think you're going to be best off just using the set and get methods, but you could use add and remove as well. Okay, so it kind of depends on how you want to do it. Everything in the array list is a student. So when I get something from the list, I have to understand that it's coming to me as a student. Okay. So what I've done right there is whichever student was at index A is now temporarily being held in a reference called S. And since I've safely stored that student, I could now replace that student within the list. Remember, the set method is replace. So I'm going to replace the student at index A. To pull off the swap, that means that the student going into index A is the one currently at index B. This does mean, though, that at this moment, the student at index B is now in the list twice. So if I stopped right here, I would actually see that student twice. Okay, whoever it was, they would be in the same list more than once. So now I want to get rid of them. So I want to replace them. Okay, so now I'm ready to replace index B. If I wrote roster.getA here, it wouldn't actually swap anything because remember, the student at index A is the same as the student at index B right now. That's why we temporarily held on to that student in a variable that I called S so that we could now complete the swap. Now, again, like I did in the previous problem, if you remember, the set method returns the student that gets taken out of the list, which in this case is the one at index A. So really, I didn't really need line 184. Like I could have just kind of done double duty right here, since it would have been the exact same as what this line 184 did. The set method's going to return to me the student that used to be at index A. That's the same thing as getting the student from index A. That's the same return. So I could combine. I don't have to. I don't have to. If you like the way I had it before, it's totally fine. You could even write this in one line of code, although I think it gets a little confusing. But this is in 2 lines of code. Let's just see. I typed a lot of code, so I probably made a mistake somewhere. Let's see if I got to go back and fix anything for you. Oh boy. All right. So line 124. It looks like I messed up. Let's go see here. All right. I forgot to write new. All right, let's do that again. Sometimes one little thing can cause a lot of errors. Yeah. Okay. So that one, sorry about that. All right. That one little mistake had a bunch of problems linked to it. So 3 failing students in list 1. Okay. Yeah. Tommy, Fred, Susan. 4 E names in roster 2. Fred, Jared, Katie, Megan. Okay. Good. A+ student in list 1. Nope. But there is one in list 2. Fred. So that's true. List 1, all better than 1.0. No, Fred fails that. All better than 0.9. Yes. Okay. Or even our lowest student was. Roster 3B students. Let's see. So anybody above 3. So Maud, Donnie, Jackie. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Roster 2, after you've removed the CDF students. Okay. So gone are Andy, Jared, and Katie. Good. Uh, Roster 1, after removing names that end in Y. So we got rid of Joey, Abby, and Tommy. Good. 3 students were removed. That's the correct count. Student roster 3, after removing C or better. Okay. Yep. So we just got those 3 left. And the 3 that we got rid of were here because they had a C or better. And then finally, we swapped Megan and Susan. So you can see right here, Megan was first, Susan was third. Now Susan's first, Megan's third. So that was our swap. All right. Yeah, that was a lot, but okay. So here you go. Let me know if you have any more questions.